Welcome to the Tuesday, November 28th, 2023 regular closed session meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. Director April Chan is absent and excused. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Okay, one moment. Director Coleman.
Present.
Director McIntosh. Here. Director Lenny.
Here.
Director Patterson.
Present.
Director Young.
Here.
President Katz.
Here. We move to public comment. If members of the public are online and wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard now. Comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration, also at this time. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments online?
We have one hand online for public comment, Lana Coleman. And you have one card for a person who's here in person. And
Let's begin with Mrs. Coleman.
yes. Lana Coleman, you should be able to unmute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, and your 3 minutes will start now.
The so-called investigation by your ad hoc committee was a joke, and by stating claims were unwarranted, you called me a liar. A fair and thorough investigation would have found everything I said to be true. The board asked for an investigation. Then Andy told me the ad hoc committee was going to report to the board with a recommendation on whether to investigate or not. That's when I knew it was a setup with no intention to investigate. It was BS. I was asked to respond to dozens of pages of written comments from the GM and GC. Every paragraph needed to be contradicted, and I was originally given 1 week to complete this. It was extended to 2 weeks, which was obviously not enough. The pressure caused me to collapse mentally and physically. Doctors recommended time away from EBMUD issues, but this was not granted by the almighty ad hoc committee. The way you treat employees' beneficiaries by breaking your word is disgusting. You should all be ashamed. If you think you got rid of me, you did not. There is fire in my voice. You added fuel to the fire by behaving unethically and misrepresenting intentions. It appears some of you have carried over your long-standing policy disagreements with John, made it personal, and I became your pawn. Most of you seem to dislike John pretty intensely, but I've been silent to this district for 31 years and have now been treated like dirt. I was denied due process by not being sent to the retirement board, yet your GC filed court documents claiming that board took action, which should indicate investigation was warranted. That's basically perjury. Clifford's behavior, as demonstrated by his comments, is pathetic. He asked a former GM if he had told John that his state salary would be used. Of course he didn't, Clifford. What I said was, he said simply that John's state service would benefit him. You asked the wrong question of Alex and used it to make it sound as if I hadn't stated the truth. As general manager, is that really the best you are capable of? Derek wrote all about the court case, which was irrelevant to the errors made by the district, and I could not comment on it. I couldn't even respond without an attorney. What an ethically compromised and perhaps legally compromised way to deal with me by your chief legal officer. I have been mistreated by you so disgustingly and detrimentally, causing permanent harm. I am not going away. I came to you for information on what my retirement income would be. Your expert told me what it would be, told me the formula that was to be used. Based on this, I gave up my successful career and retired. I bought a retirement home I cannot afford. You have screwed me. Apologies, but there's no other word to cover it, and I haven't even received an apology. Your GC said we needed to go to court to get permission for the district to pay the higher amount, which he and Clifford both said, they'd like to pay. Instead, your GC fought it with intensity. You are not to be trusted. You have not acted with integrity, and you deserve to have everyone to continue to hear this from me, meeting after meeting, until you demonstrate accountability for your actions. If my new career needs to be speaking in public comment at board meetings for years to come, so be it.
I'd like to reply to that. I served on the ad hoc committee. I take exception to anything that indicates that wasn't a full investigation done by the committee. Spent hours of time going over all the comments by Mrs. Coleman, all the documents that she provided, all the replies that she gave to us. And we concluded, along with the board's a review of our recommendations, that the allegations that Lana Coleman made against our general manager and general counsel, that they were unfounded. We further decided that no further investigation action is warranted, and the investigation is closed. But believe
And
me,
you're
I
unbiased.
spent hours and hours of time on that. You've had your 3 minutes, Mrs. Coleman. I'm taking my time to reply and set the record straight, because I spent many, many hours on this, at times that I could have spent doing other more fruitful things, but obviously important that we have a thorough investigation and report. I would be happy to release that report. I'd also like to know how much we spent on legal fees to be able to help prepare that report, if that's what we would like to do.
And I'd also like to briefly respond that the investigation was initiated based on the complaints raised and the issues raised by Mrs. Coleman. And it has nothing to do with any personal feelings regarding our colleague director. If anything, we took great care to look carefully at the facts and to not be swayed by anything of the sort. So I take issue with that statement as well. We move on to Yvette Rivera.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Give me one moment. Before Yvette Rivera speaks, Director Coleman.
Yes, Director Coleman.
Stand up.
Thank you very much. What was not addressed were the major decisions made by by senior staff and others that were addressed in previous comments by Lana. And it wasn't about the court case. It hadn't been about the court case. It is not about the court case. It's about the mistakes that were made in the process that eventually led to a court case. That's what my wife was searching for, and that's what was not done.
Thank you, Director Coleman. Yvette Rivera.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I am not sure if board members are supposed to be rebutting public comment when it's not on the agenda. In terms of you, Director Linney, being on an ad hoc committee to examine what happened in that retirement fiasco where people were given misinformation and they made life changes that impacted their retirement, you were the last person that should have been on that ad hoc committee. The way that you were so hostile to Lana Coleman at a meeting for daring to try to get the benefits due to retirees before PEPRA was in place was completely out of hand. And at that board meeting, I said so. I've been at this meeting when board members have wanted to rebut me and have said basically the same thing, have done the same thing that you've done. They shut me off because I had my time. Again, I don't believe board members are supposed to be engaging in a rebuttal when a member of the public makes a comment and it's not on the agenda. I'm going to go on and talk about what I wanted to talk about now, which is the contract for general counsel and general manager. I provided you the contract for Craig Spencer and Mr. McDonald. Craig Spencer only had 2 items on his contract that said he could lose his pension, he could lose his health benefits and his some other kind of pay. Really, for those of us who are regular civil servants, we lose our retirement. You just get back what you paid into the system. But, okay, so Mr. Spencer had 2 reasons why he could lose his severance pay and his health benefits, which were, he pulled the wool over your eyes. I don't know who wrote that contract. I don't know who put it in place, but I'll talk about it at another board meeting because I just talked about Lana Coleman and it took up my time. The other contract for Mr. McDonald has 8 reasons, and it really should have 9. I'm going to tell you why. Because if you look at Mr. Spencer's contract, the first line in it says, severance pay and health insurance coverage under this paragraph shall not be provided if termination, it should say termination or resignation of employment is for any of the reasons identified as exclusions under District Policy 22.17. Again, he retired before he could be fired. So of course, he's not going to lose his retirement benefits. And the second reason why he could lose his retirement benefits,
Please, I'll recognize you for another 2 minutes since you spoke on a non-agenda item as well as this agenda
thank
item.
you, I really appreciate it, Director Katz. And the second item that Mr. Spencer had in his contract, and I already brought this up last year, and I was hoping that I would be able to tell Director April Chan what I told you last year. On Mr. Spencer's contract, it says that severance pay and health insurance coverage that has been paid under this paragraph shall be reimbursed by the general counsel to the district in the event that general counsel is convicted of a crime. To be convicted of a crime means that somebody has to bring a case against you. This board isn't going to bring a case against Mr. Spencer for using public funds to hire his own attorney. This board who loves him, that gave him a service award before he left when a case was pending, isn't going to file a case, a criminal case against him. So this was an out for him. You cannot be found guilty of a criminal crime if you violate discriminatory practices. That's just civil, or retaliatory practices. So what I told Director Patterson this morning was, I know the board has said several times, we trust our staff. They're the ones who know, they're the subject matter experts. It's your responsibility to make sure the laws of this state and of this government are enforced. Don't leave it in the hands of people that I don't even know where they graduated from. Please, I yield.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. Are there any other speakers for public comment? And we will, if not, we will now convene to conference room 8 to discuss closed session agenda items. We are scheduled to return for the regular meeting at 1:15 p.m. Welcome to the Tuesday, November 28th regular business meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. We will receive reports from this morning's Finance Administration Committee under item 14. In accordance with Government Code Section 54953 et sec, Director April Chan notified the General Manager and the Secretary of the District of the need to participate in today's closed session meeting from a remote location due to just cause. In accordance with Government Code 54953 et sec, Director Coleman Chan will provide a general description of the circumstances relating to the need to appear remotely in today's closed session meeting. Director Chan.
Yes. I want to apologize to everybody and say that I really want to be there. And November has really kind of been a disaster for my health, but there was a medical emergency yesterday. I had a 9:30 a.m. appointment, and by 12:30 I was in surgery. So, and Director Patterson, I'm so sorry. I know it must have been, neither Director Coleman or I were there for the meeting, and I apologize, and I thank Risha and Clifford for handling all of the stuff with the Aqua conference. I was scheduled to go, but the doctor said I can only go if it was critical for me to attend. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that information, and I don't think the apology is in order, and we understand your just cause here, and thank you for making yourself available for the regular meeting. So I will call for a motion and a second to amend the agenda to allow the board to vote on Director Chan's request to appear remotely.
So moved.
Moved by Director Young and seconded by Director Patterson. All those in favor, roll call.
Aye.
Roll call vote. Director Chan?
Roll call vote.
Yeah.
Director
Yes.
Yes.
Director Lenny?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
Yes.
Director Young?
Yes.
President Katz?
Yes. Director Chan, in accordance with Government Code Section 54953 F2C, You will need to keep your audio open and camera on at all times while appearing remotely. Accordingly, in accordance with Government Code 54953F2B, you will need to disclose whether any individual over the age of 18 is present in the room with you at any time during the remote meeting and describe the general nature of your relationship with the individual.
Yeah, there's nobody here.
All right, thank you. We will now have roll call, Madam
you.
Secretary.
One moment. President Katz, you need to, so the first motion and second was to amend the agenda to allow the board to vote, and you need to call for a motion and a second to vote on Director Chan's
That is
request
correct, yes.
to
So
appear remotely.
I provided
I'll
that
move the
guidance. It's been moved by Director Coleman,
Second.
seconded by Director Young. Roll call.
Director Chan,
Yes.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Lenny,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Katz.
Yes. And I won't repeat the guidance I provided earlier, and Director Chan has already announced that nobody is in the room with her. Roll call.
Director Chan,
Yes.
Director Coleman,
Present.
Director Lenny,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Here.
President Katz.
Here. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America,
Of the United States of America,
one
to
nation,
the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all.
There are no announcements from closed session. We have a presentation. Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, President Katz. So for the 18th consecutive year, the district has received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Government Finance Officers Association for its annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or the ACFR. The ACFR is evaluated by an impartial panel of judges to ensure it meets the high standards of the program, which includes demonstrating the spirit of transparency and full disclosure to clearly communicate its financial story and motivate potential users and user groups to read the ACFR. The Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in the area of governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by a government and its management. The core team in the room today responsible for the final production of the report consists of the following employees: Yenny Coburn, Accountant 3, Winston Shea, Accounting System Supervisor, and Melody Wang, Accounting and Financial System Analyst. These individuals demonstrate teamwork and integrity in financial reporting, which exemplifies the values of EBMUD. In addition to the core team, various staff throughout the district provided critical information to ensure a clean audit and an award-winning report. And Director Patterson is here to present the award.
It is both my honor and pleasure to make this presentation. The Government Finance Officers Association Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And we have the finest staff. Over my period of time, your department, you've been champion. You're like the old warriors used to be. You're the best. Congratulations.
Move to public comment. If members of the public are online and wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard now. Comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments online?
We have 2 hands for public comment. I'm going to call on Kelly A. first. You should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you. One of the items that the Finance Committee looked at briefly this morning was the impasse in negotiations about the Los Vaqueros expansion. And the East Bay Mud has some issues with that, such as there's one of the parties is demanding that the Joint Powers Authority should not engage in any advocacy. They're asking East Bay Mud or they're asking for more control over operations and more control over construction of the dam without having to pay much of the much or all of the much or any of the budget and so on. So the CCWD's demands seems like East Bay Mud is dragging its feet in with respect to these CCW demands. I just wanted to also take a look briefly at the idea of swapping out East Bay Mud and replacing East Bay Mud with some other agency. This is a big project and it has a lot of member agencies. But this idea that you can just swap out East Bay Mud is not very practical because East Bay Mud is in a very strategic location. East Bay Mud has a lot of water rights, and East Bay Mud has control over a lot of facilities like the Freeport, like McCallum River Basin facilities, like a lot of things. And East Bay Mud is so tied into this project that getting this thing off the ground, the way it operates with all the moving parts and all the pieces and all the legal things that go into all the water rights, everything that goes into a giant project like Los Vaqueros, to operate it without East Bay Mud as a full participant is not very practical. And so I just want to remind your board that your very important role there. And this thing is not going. I don't think it's going to get off the ground without East Bay Mud. Thanks.
Madam Secretary, is there one additional speaker?
Yes, we have Lana Coleman. You should be able to unmute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, your 3 minutes start now.
The actions by your ad hoc committee were a joke. I guess it's more businesslike to say it was improperly handled. And by stating my claims were unsubstantiated, you called me a liar and my husband a liar. A fair, thorough, unbiased investigation by an outside party would have found everything I said to be true, or I wouldn't be here so upset about it. When I spoke this morning, Director Linney inappropriately took the opportunity to complain about the long hours he spent reading the materials. If you had done a real investigation, Doug, it wouldn't have been up to you to read it all. I believe the original board motion said you were to coordinate the investigation, not pretend to be an investigator. You previously yelled at me, Doug, that it wasn't fair John would be eligible for more retirement. You should be yelling at the people who made the rules on reciprocity, not those who were promised by the district they would benefit from it. You should be yelling at the people who gave bad information, not at me. Your hostility is misdirected. Reading the materials gives a he said, she said result. Clearly, the perspectives are different. No surprise. We knew that at the start. An investigation is to decide which of those two sides is correct. And that was not undertaken. And to have biased board members decide the staff's side was true without thorough, unbiased investigation is a disgrace to this district. The way you treat employees' beneficiaries by breaking your word is disgusting. You should all be ashamed. If you think you got rid of me, you did not. You only lit the fire. This is about more than retirement benefits. It's about you ignoring the district's mistakes and then stating my claims are untrue. Example one that should have been investigated. I was denied due process by not being sent to the retirement board, which your ordinance requires, and could have avoided the court case and saved me $50,000 in legal fees. Yet your GC filed court documents claiming that board took that action. The retirement board. There is no way any version other than this is true. Isn't this what is called perjury? Example two to have investigated. Clifford incorrectly referred to how obvious it was that Elizabeth wrote a letter to CalPERS asking about reciprocity because John didn't qualify at the district. What Clifford called obvious was untrue. He wasn't even there, yet you apparently believed him. I have been mistreated by you so disgustingly and detrimentally, causing me permanent harm that I am not going away. I came to the district for information on what my retirement income would be. Your expert, identified by the then general manager, told me the formula that would be used. Based on this, I gave up my successful career and retired. I bought a retirement home I can no longer afford. You waited years to tell me you made a mistake and claim you have no responsibility. You have screwed me. Apologies, but there's no other word, and I haven't even received an apology. Your GC said we needed to go to court to, quote unquote, get permission to pay so the district could pay the higher amount, which he and Clifford both said they would like to pay, but couldn't because CalPERS tied their hands. Instead, we were shocked to experience your GC fighting it with intensity. You are not to be trusted. You have acted without integrity, and you deserve to have everyone continue to hear this from me repeatedly until you demonstrate accountability for your actions. If my new career needs to be speaking in public comment at board meetings for years to come, so be it.
Director Linney.
I respect Mrs. Coleman's right to speak at our meeting, and I don't disagree with that, but I do want to remind the public that at Mrs. Coleman's request, the board appointed an ad hoc committee in which I participated, as well as two of the other directors. We spent several months doing a thorough investigation of the allegations that Mrs. Coleman made, reviewing all documents, including emails and other documents she submitted. We reviewed the transcripts of all the comments she has made at board meetings. We found that each allegation to be unfounded. The report was accepted by the full board.
Thank you, Director Linney. We have one more speaker card in the room from Bernard Ashcraft.
Good afternoon. I'm Bernard Ashcraft with the Bay Area Business Roundtable. And I had a couple of documents passed out to you that are very important. I met with the general manager, Mr. Chan, 6 months ago. No follow-up, no return calls, no emails, him or staff. But let me digress just a minute, because you have a second document, and it's titled, "Who is Bernard Ashcraft?" Several council members and San Leandro, the vice mayor, made a motion to name a building after me. It's been put on hold for a minute, but the motion did pass. But a lot of hate was expressed. And let me just briefly say that one call that the vice mayor got was very vicious, has several N-words, but he did say something that got my attention, and that was, "Who is Bernard Ashcraft?" So I calmed everybody down and said, look, that's a good question. So I, in turn, wrote up a document explaining who Bernard Ashcraft is. And I'd like for you to take a look at that. You see, communication is a very key platform. Communications is extremely important. I've been a drum major for social and economic justice all of my life. And let me tell you, one of the things I learned in Vietnam was you never give up, you never give in, because together you can win. And I had good foxhole buddies. So I'm here to tell you that we need to do better in talking to each other, Mr. Chan. We should look at a new way forward to make workforce development a reality for many low-income and people of color. We can do that if we work together. So I hope that you will take a look at that and understand where we're going, because to have a public agency like EBMUD not to speak to the issue, and you might turn me down, I don't know, but at least communicate. And I also wanted to come by here because I haven't seen Andy in a long time, and I saw Mr. Patterson a couple of weeks ago dancing. So it's always good to see you. So I hope you will take a look at that and consider it, and let's get on track and do what's right, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ashcraft. It was great to work with you nearly a decade ago when you, Director Patterson, and I worked with the staff, particularly around procurement issues and contract equity. And your recommendations were taken into account and did help inform improvements in our program. And if you ever have views that you think would help us improve our contract equity and outreach efforts, we are taking those efforts very seriously and would welcome further input. We're in receipt of a memo for a proposal, and while we are not able to act on that right now, and we are generally limited in what we can sponsor that's outside of our mission, this looks like an excellent program, especially for our county public health departments, and I think that it is, I certainly know who you are and recognize your leadership on equity issues in the community, so thank you for coming.
Well, all of our training is done in collaboration with industry, education, government, and community. And what I'm proposing is this cardiac monitor technician program is with our Rhythm Technologies over in San Francisco. They want to hire 120 people at $31 an hour and a $5,000 sign-on bonus. Not too bad for low-income people. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Yvette Rivera.
Thank you. I provided you documents this morning on the old contracts for Derek McDonald and Craig Spencer. I mentioned that Derek McDonald had 8 items on his contract that said severance pay and benefits could be forfeited if he committed some acts. And I mentioned also that there is one, a 9th subject that should be added, which is the one about violating a district policy. I also at lunchtime emailed you a document from PERS that talks about how people can forfeit their pension if they are convicted of a crime, civil servants. And it's something that should be looked at so that maybe it will deter East Bay MUD employees from engaging in activities that are considered criminal. A document that I gave you a document called Inferring Pretext in Employment Discrimination Cases, a baker's dozen. The reason I give this to you is because listening to Lana Coleman reminds me of how many times many of us have been subjected to sham investigations. It gets pretty tiring hearing Director Doug Linney, talk about how the district conducted a thorough investigation. I recall you saying that about the Pierce and Bland case, and obviously a jury found different because they were awarded $8 million. And as I remind this board constantly, interest is accruing. I also provided only 2 members of the board just now the complaint determination that Catherine Tate rendered. And, you know, before I used to get them, and it was very upsetting, and it's still upsetting. But after seeing the Exhibit 108, the Saji Pierce response to her determination, I realized that this is just how the district conducts business. And they did it to Lana Coleman. For Doug Linney to say a good investigation was conducted when he's not even an investigator. For the district to hire Ren Noski to conduct 2 investigations at the district before I came to you and showed you documents that he worked at agencies where he was accused of defamation and mishandling a sexual harassment complaint. For the district not to do due diligence, all I did was run a Google search. So it really gets exhausting, and I'm sorry that Director Coleman's wife has to continue to come to the board to not be gaslit. But that's what district employees have to do. And I'm going to just sign off by saying this document that I gave you about inferring pretext, employees don't have to give you, and Director Coleman's wife does not have to give you direct evidence to prove their cases, to prove my case. All we have to do is give you circumstantial evidence. But all you do is take the word of the people that are committing these violations of our rights. Thank you, I yield.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. We move to the consent calendar. Are there any comments from the public on consent calendar items? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to approve items 1 through 11. Okay, been moved by Director Patterson and seconded by Director Young.
Excuse me. Trying to raise my hand here. Can I just pull item 11, please?
Okay, let's talk about item 11 separately. So the the motion will be to approve items 1 through 10. Is that agreeable with the mover and seconder?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Roll call.
Director Chan,
Yes.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Lenny,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Katz.
Yes. Item 11.
Thank you. I was not in the finance meeting where it was, I was not at the meeting earlier today. My question is, this is specific to Contra Costa County. Does not Alameda County also have?
You froze, Director Coleman.
Can the staff person just come and present the
Annexations?
item?
And why is this one?
Director Coleman, your audio and visual froze while you were speaking. Would you please repeat
Oh,
what you were saying?
Certainly. The question is, why is Alameda County not included as well as Contra Costa County in the item for advisory election for the annexation outside of Contra Costa County urban limit line? Policy number 3.08.
Yes. So Director Coleman, we did have an opportunity to discuss it at the committee today, and Barry's here to share what he shared this morning.
Good afternoon, Directors. Director Coleman, in response to the question that you raised last month, we did research to determine why we needed a policy to provide the voters of Contra Costa County with the opportunity to cast an election on annexation. And our research showed us that when they passed Measure D in Alameda County, that was essentially giving the voters of Alameda County an opportunity to determine which areas currently within Alameda County would be eligible for service. So the difference being in one county, Contra Costa, even if the county supervisors elect to annex an area, EBMUD chooses to give the voters an opportunity, whereas in Alameda County, the voters have already determined which areas are eligible for annexation.
So Barry, what happens if in Alameda County, the Board of Supervisors or the Planning Commission decides they want to annex an area that is not allowed to be annexed at this point in time? What is the process for them? How is it different in Contra Costa, where the Board of Supervisors decided to do that one development in East San Ramon in Alameda County? Couldn't they do the same thing?
My understanding, and I won't do Derek's job for him, but the voters in Alameda County have authorized annexation through Measure D. So if supervisors in Alameda County want to go outside of that, they would then have to go back to the voters to get them to amend the areas contained within Measure D.
That is for certain?
Yes, that's correct.
And maybe, Karen, would you like to come up and
Yeah. So I
provide a little-
invited Karen Donovan from the Office of General Counsel to answer questions in detail.
Thank you.
Just to speak to that in a little more detail. So the two urban growth measures work a little differently. In Contra Costa County, where they have an urban limit line, there can be determinations. Essentially, the Board of Supervisors could adjust that line in certain circumstances. In fact, that has happened recently for a development that EBMUD is opposing. They moved the line to cover a 30-acre area. In looking at the Alameda County urban growth boundaries and how any development could be brought in that EBMUD would oppose, that can't happen without already doing an election by the voters. Essentially, while both of these involved originally a vote by the voters, when the measure that established the urban growth boundary in Alameda County was passed, it did not have these exceptions that are included within the Contra Costa one. So in other words, there is no need to hold an advisory election or any other type of election, because in Alameda County, in any circumstance in which we would be asked to, or in which an annexation of a development that we opposed or that exceeded what is allowed in Alameda County were to happen, it could only happen already with a vote. In other words, that would have to go to the voters already. So if we were to include Alameda County in this proposal, we would essentially be asking for an advisory election following an election that has already happened. In other words, the voters would be advising essentially on something they already did. So,
And binding,
Okay.
right? The election that would happen in Alameda County is a binding election.
exactly. In order to move the urban growth boundary or to establish a higher level of growth than the already very limited growth that's allowed to occur, there would have to be a binding election. Our policy calls for an advisory election, which is also less binding on the situation and on LAFCO.
So quick question. Thank you, Karen, for that explanation. Who pays the cost of the advisory election?
Right.
Because go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, fortunately, one of those has not happened. The way it would have to be run by the county, if we were to call an advisory election under the policy, which would be in Contra Costa County, we would have to reimburse the county's costs in doing so. And these can get very expensive, and it's an advisory election, so it is a very expensive election that is actually not binding.
Okay. I thought it'd be very expensive because there's a lot of voters in Contra Costa County in our service area.
Yes, and there are some ambiguities and some decisions that would be made if we were to do this as to the scope of the kind of electorate in this advisory election. It is not necessarily the entirety of the county voters, but regardless, it would be expensive.
Well, wouldn't it be just the voters who are in East EBMUD service area in Alameda, Contra Costa County?
It would be
Not
no
people in Brentwood
more.
necessarily.
It would be no more than that, except potentially voters in the affected area, because recognize this whole policy is about annexing additional territory to East EBMUD. But it may not necessarily be all the voters in Contra Costa County. Once again, we've never been faced with this situation, so we haven't sorted through factually, and it would be very fact-specific.
Director Vice President McIntosh?
So Karen, you said something very interesting, and this is an advisory vote. It's very expensive, and yet it's not binding.
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Yes, yes.
Very expensive means a few $1 million. I mean, what are we talking about?
I guess the only reference point I would have at this point would be when we have run elections for this board and the cost there. And I don't know if Derek or Clifford could speak to that.
Several $100,000.
Yes.
Well, it's several $100,000 per ward, isn't it?
Yeah,
ward.
yeah. So
$1
it could
million seems-
easily be $1 million. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I guess what's the point if it's not binding?
I believe that when now recognize this is a policy that was passed by the board in January of
Oh, I know.
2003. It followed some movement of the urban limit line in Contra Costa County that I believe the board at the time did not support. And so it was, I believe it was the idea that I don't know that, the way the LAFCO annexation proceedings work, that is run by LAFCO. That is something where the board would have the ability to pass resolutions to oppose and East EBMUD could contest something, but ultimately LAFCO is the decision-making body in those cases. I believe that is why the board has set policy 3.08 up to be an advisory election. We can't call a binding election under the laws. So that is the reason the policy is written the way it is.
Yeah. And my recollection is that the last time we discussed this, we talked about further information and further discussion, and, you know, now here we are. So I will be abstaining from policy 3.08.
Okay. And I'll let
do we-
Barry speak to this, but I believe that the question we were asked to look into, because there is a very minimal change that is being proposed to this policy. And the question we were asked to look into is, why does it apply only to Contra Costa County and not to Alameda County?
Yeah.
And essentially, we in looking into it and really getting an understanding of Alameda County and how the urban growth limits work there, it was the determination that it was likely thought at the time, I don't know, I don't have all the records, we're ordering those, that it was not necessary to have it in Alameda County. It would essentially not serve any purpose.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense.
And the only changes to this policy in this board action are to strike the cross-references to two other policies that don't have strong relevance.
Correct.
And there's no operative changes to the policy.
None.
The other question I have, and thank you, Karen, for that explanation, especially regarding Alameda County. It says advisory election shall occur prior to the time the Contra Costa Local Agency Information Committee, or LAFCO, is scheduled to consider annexation to the territory to EBMUD. How do we're able to dictate when that LAFCO has to? I know they have to make they have to make the motion to do it, and then it comes to us. At least that's how I currently understand it. That if there's a development issue, LAFCO says yay or nay. If they say yay, then it comes to us and we say yay or nay. Now it's saying that the vote has to happen. Again, the advisory vote has to happen before LAFCO makes a decision.
essentially, what currently happens is that LAFCO does seek our input when they are asked to annex. When an annexation petition comes in and we provide that input, they typically defer to us. And I believe that in this situation, what is anticipated is that LAFCO would seek EBMUD's input on an annexation that would be to us, it would affect us, to serve to allow that development to be included. We would, if it was determined that an advisory election was appropriate, we would seek the delay in order to have the advisory election. Once again, we have never had to invoke that, but I believe that was the intent when the policy was enacted.
Director Young.
So shall is not the word shall is not mandatory, shall occur. It can go either way then, correct?
Well, when it says EBMUD shall call an advisory election on the question, I believe that the intent of the policy is that EBMUD shall call an advisory election. Now, and once again, we are not LAFCO. We would request that LAFCO defer the decision while we call the advisory election.
Okay.
Director Young.
Yeah, I mean, I read through the packet, and what I understand this to be, I mean, is the only thing that we're doing is deleting the references that we're using, policy 703 and 709, and that there are no other changes to the policy. So this is not a substantive policy issue. This is a policy that was passed in, 2000, you said 2003 initially? So I don't understand what I mean, John asked a question about why is it just Contra Costa, fair question. But I don't think the rest of this, we're not discussing whether to change the policy or not. That might be a perfectly good conversation to have or engage in. All we're doing, this is just technical cleanup is all that's happening here. So I have no problem voting for it. I don't know what I think about being required to hold an advisory election. And maybe that's a good conversation to have and review. But for my part, this is really just a technical correction.
Yeah, so again, I mean, it is just a cleanup of the policy, and the reason why we brought it back was because it was a cleanup of the policy before, but there was a question about Alameda County, which is what we responded to. So again, we have the cleanup of the policy, but what I'm hearing is, maybe there's a further discussion on the policy itself, but right now, we're just trying to clean up the policy.
I would love to have a further discussion on the policy itself.
So would I.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so it sounds like that, the cleanup, it should not be controversial, and the board members who serve on both the Finance Administration and the Planning Committees have requested for discussion. It does seem like this is something that, while it's codified as a district policy, it also concerns planning matters. And so I would recommend having presentations in tandem at both committees to review these
And
issues.
I will call for approval of the item. But I'd like to have, the discussion shouldn't be about whether there's an advisory vote. I think the discussion should be about what tools are available to us as a board to exercise, if we have a position to oppose annexation or whatever, what our options and what the, pros and cons are of various tools in our toolbox. Right now, we have a toolbox that actually requires us to spend several hundred thousand to maybe $1 million on an election that isn't binding, which presumably would be already at that point a pretty high stakes issue for us. And the most recent one, we know we've already spent a lot of money on. So I think it's a fine discussion to have in planning and finance. I just wouldn't limit it to whether or not an advisory election is the right,
No,
tool.
I appreciate that. It should be a broader discussion. I appreciate you trying to frame it, and I agree, it should be a broader discussion than just a bit and piece of the policy. So I look forward to that, Clifford.
Okay.
Thank you, Director Young and Vice President McIntosh, and that's why I recommend
Director Chan, that was a hand raised.
Policy discussion at the Planning Committee. Director Chan?
Okay, I just want to make sure about something. This is not time sensitive, right? This is not a time sensitive issue.
So I guess what we're recommending, this is just a cleanup to existing policy that exists. What I'm hearing, the request from the board is we will come back both to planning and finance administration with various options on, what tools do we have to oppose these type of annexations that might lead to a whole new policy. But right now, for this existing policy, we're just trying to clean it up.
So I guess why I'm asking is because, I would prefer to have an entire discussion on the policy. And so I'm just wondering, is the cleanup that you're referring to, is that time sensitive?
Yeah, no, it's not time sensitive.
So why not put the entire thing over?
Exactly.
We could, generally, we like to clean up policies if we find problems with it. But again, we can come back with a further discussion on the policy itself. But I think first is, what options we have.
We're not there's no action item right now to rescind or change the policy. So we do these cleanups all the time on all of our policies. And seems like we vote on these, 5-6 times a year on different things that are mostly cleanup. So not holding this over doesn't also accomplish anything either in my mind. It's sort of like, let's make the policy conform to what our current policies are, which is all this is doing. And in terms of references, just really removing references so that somebody goes and looks in workplace safety and health, they're not going to find a reference to the extension of urban limit lines.
Director
anyway.
Patterson?
I think the clarity is, there's nothing wrong with the policy as written. It's a cleanup on the wordage. It has nothing to do with the policy itself. It's cleaning up on this advisory method of handling something that's brought to our attention. In this case, the policy stands no matter which way you go, because you can't have anybody come and declare us as the source of their water when in fact they haven't gotten that from us. So that's a different conversation. And I wanted to make sure you were clear on it.
Thank you, Director Patterson. I'm going to take public comment. We have a speaker card from Yvette Rivera.
We also don't have a second on the motion.
We don't,
I don't think.
so can I get clarification on the maker just restating the motion
To approve staff's recommendation.
for all three policies proposed?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Moved by Director Young and seconded by Director Linney, and this does not modify the understanding that policy 3.08 will go to our committees for review as requested in this discussion.
I respectfully ask that 3.08 be separated from the other two policies.
Okay, we will sever the vote on that. Before we take action, I will call Yvette Rivera.
That's acceptable to the maker.
I'm fine with that, too.
Thank you, I appreciate the time. I had a question and I put it on the card. This morning, there was a meeting without a quorum. Only Director Patterson was there. I provided a document before the closed board meeting, but I didn't talk about it because I wasn't sure if you guys were gonna, sorry, not you guys, but if the directors were gonna vote on that today. So this vote right now is on that policy 2.21R also?
Yeah, thank you for raising this question. Is it okay if I read the subject on your
Yes,
your
please.
card? Our policies, procedures changes voted on when there was no quorum in the committee meeting, and I'll go ahead and just
Please.
state my understanding of our practice. We often do have policy, we typically have policies go through the Finance and Administration Committee for a review, and when we don't anticipate modifications, they appear on the board's agenda often that same day, and sometimes they need to be redrafted for a following meeting. Our rules of procedure, separate from our obligations under the Brown Act,
Right.
do designate a meeting to include one director. So if we do have less than a quorum, for the purposes of our rules of procedure under Sturgis, it is a meeting, even though a majority can't act as the committee and pass a vote of the committee. So it's up to the board whether we would, want to have that discussion here as a board, or whether we would want to refer this back to the committee for more discussion. And that's my understanding of the issues here. Both directors who were absent from the morning committee were excused for valid reasons. So we have had some discussion of the issues anticipated for that policy, and we have a motion to approve the technical changes, and we have reached consensus that regardless of the outcome of that motion, that we would want to have the issues further considered by the committee for a
Okay,
future time.
so I'd like to go ahead and oppose the acceptance of policy 2.21R based on what I said this morning, which is I referred to a document that lists the employment at will doctrine, the three major exceptions. In the policy change was only to add non-discriminatory. So an employee, just to summarize, could be discharged for any non-discriminatory reason. This document that I provided the board provides the three exceptions in the state of California. It lists all the states that have 2 exceptions, 3, so forth. But this document seems a little deceptive. I'll use a word that Doug Linney likes to throw at me sometimes. This document seems a little deceptive. It doesn't call attention to the fact there are 3 exceptions to the at-will doctrine, where someone can be fired for good cause, bad cause, or no cause at all. And the judicial exceptions to the rule seek to prevent wrongful terminations. Thank you, I yield.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. I'd like to ask a question about Ms. Rivera's comment on policy 2.21, and that is whether we interpret non-discriminatory to include whistleblower retaliation, or if we would, and so if those principles of California labor law are embedded in the employee appeal and grievance policy, or if that is really something that would be covered elsewhere, or should that be read to incorporate the principle that I just explained and what Ms. Rivera might have been referring to in addition, or would we expect this to be redrafted to be complete? So that's my question in response to that.
So as currently stated, the policy indicates that probationary and exempt from civil service employees are at will and may be discharged for any reason. The policy is being modified to say that they may be discharged for any non-discriminatory reason. And when we say non-discriminatory in a policy, we're meaning that any activities that would be determined to be discriminatory under California labor law.
Okay, so it would, so the discrimination is typically referred to in terms of protected classes, but in this context,
Yes.
it will also include protected conduct too.
Right.
I think that addresses my question. Any other?
Excuse me, I'd like to clarify. There are 3 exceptions, and the state exception is one of them.
Step to the mic, just so that
Ms.
people
Rivera,
online.
briefly, if you could describe that.
I said, yes, state exception is any state laws, but there's the covenant of good faith exception, and the public policy exception is the state exemption. And there's one more, the implied contract exception. And of course, we're not referring to the implied contract exception with probationary or exempt employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. And, I had to learn this for myself as a young employment lawyer, but the public employees derive their rights from statute, which means the violations in public, discharge in violation of public policy does not affect public employees, and it also is, the implied duty of good faith was repealed by the California Supreme Court in Foley versus Interactive Systems in the 1980s. So we could choose as a board to make this policy broader, but in terms of reflecting state law, that wouldn't apply. But I think it's very important that we all understand that non-discriminatory includes protected conduct and whistleblower retaliation. I'm satisfied with the explanation, but I think it would be good for staff to have a written procedure if we don't have whistleblower retaliation handled somewhere else in our scheme of policies. I do understand that we are looking at that for future policy review. So could staff comment about that?
Well, we do have a whistleblower presentation and a discussion for the board that we're going to be bringing forward at some point in the future.
To committee at the beginning of next year.
We do have a whistleblower policy embedded in the board ethics policy. We will be discussing breaking that out into a separate policy at future meetings, so.
Okay. All right, so we will take a vote on the motion, and we will sever the question to first vote on the
2.1 and
7.13.
correct.
and 7.13.
Correct. We will first take that vote. Roll call.
Director Chan?
Just want to be 100% clear. 7.13 is not what John has been discussing, what we've been discussing, right?
Correct. Yeah, we haven't had any discussion as a full board in this meeting on policy 7.13. It's recommended by the committee. And
Do you know what? I'm just going to abstain because I haven't been able to look at that material given special circumstances. So I'll abstain.
Okay, we're still in roll call.
Yes, abstain.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Lenny,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes,
Director Young,
Yes.
President Katz.
Yes. And we now will take the vote on policy 3.08. Roll call?
So is that under the same motion?
Yes.
We're
No.
voting,
No, it's two
no,
separate
it's two
motions.
separate-
But I
Okay.
would- as the maker, accepted
to separate it.
bifurcating it, so I guess I'm the maker of the other motion as well.
Okay. And Director Lenny, you will be the second for this
Yes, I'm
motion
fine
on
with that.
3.08? Okay.
Okay, then we'll recognize this as a separate motion, and we'll take a roll call now.
Got it. This is on 3.08. Director Chan,
Abstain.
Director Coleman,
Abstain.
Director Lenny,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Abstain.
Director Patterson,
yes,
Director Young,
Yes.
President Katz.
Yes. Okay, we move to number 12 for the appointment of a controller. Director, General Manager Chan.
Yes, so following a comprehensive recruitment, I'm pleased to bring to you for your consideration the appointment of David Glasser as the controller for the district. David has 35 years of experience in accounting and finance, 20 of those years in the public sector. Most recently, he served as the Director of Finance with the City of Martinez. There, he was responsible for the city's annual financial audits, tracking and accounting of the city's revenue, accounting department, billing, and payroll. Mr. Glasser has a bachelor's degree from the State University of New York in Albany and a master's degree from Rockefeller College.
Is there a motion?
I'll move.
Second?
Moved by Director Lenny and seconded by Vice President McIntosh. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We have to do roll call.
Excuse me, I am not calling roll call when I should. I will call for a roll call vote on the motion.
Director Chan,
Yes.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Lenny,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Katz.
Yes. Congratulations.
Congratulations. David, would you like to come up and say a few words?
President Katz, Vice President McIntosh, members of the board, I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve the district. I'm very excited, very looking forward to working with Sophia and her team. I've been a fan of the district. I'm also a customer. And I don't know if you remember President Katz, but we've run into each other a couple of times when I was working with the Area Air Quality Management District, and you've been there as speaker for many times. So I look forward to working with members of the board and the members of the staff. Thank you for the appointment and the opportunity.
Thank you. Welcome. 13, General Manager's report.
Yeah, all I have, the Speaker's Bureau is at your places. We did make one correction that was noted on page 2 on the water walk for the McCollum. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer it.
Good. We move to committee reports. The minutes from the November 14th, 2023 Planning and Sustainability Committees were included in the agenda materials. We will now receive an update from this morning's Finance Administration Committee meeting. Director Patterson.
Yes. Today's meeting was held, and due to lack of a quorum, all of the items were heard, but no action taken. The summary of the items heard: Los Vaqueros Reservoir Expansion Project update. Concerns, but no action taken. The monthly investment transactions and the revision of district policies by Barry. The fiscal year 2023 annual budget performance report. And the financial indicators of fiscal year 2023. Those were really gone through, and some of them have already passed on the consent calendar. The fiscal year 2023 audited financial statements, there was a oral report from Brandon Young, assurance partner, Lance Soil, and Lundgaard. It was an excellent presentation and did go into deep detail. Again, no action taken, but those things were thoroughly discussed and heard by me. That's my report.
Thank you, Director Patterson. Other items for future consideration, please submit those to the general manager. And thank you for, if you have already submitted your written comments to the secretary, are there any verbal director comments or reports?
I just want to say again, I'm sorry I wasn't able to make it to the finance admin meeting today, Director Patterson. But I also wanted to wish everyone who's going to Aqua safe travels. I'm sorry I'm not going to be there. Safe travels to all of you.
Thank you and be well.
You'll be missed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wish for a flight delay, I think, at this point.
Okay,
I just want to welcome my grandson to the world, to Oakland, as one of our newest East Bay Mud customers.
How about that?
What's his name?
His name is Noah Alonzo Young Garces, and he was born on November 20th.
Oh, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
And I look forward to joining all of you remotely for the next board meeting, as I will be at COP28. And we've had another year with wildfires devastating portions of California. And while we didn't have a severe drought this year, we know that they're happening more frequently. So that is the perspective I will be going with as we keep working on addressing the climate emergency. And I'm proud of what the district has done in our part to address our emissions.
And we have 2 hours before our flight leaves.
Okay, with that.
I go. Gotta go.
The next regular meeting of the Board of Directors will be held on Tuesday, December 12th, 2023 at 1:15 p.m. This meeting is now adjourned.